Hi everyone. A really, really good question we've had in about personality. Hi Claire. I have a question about personality tests. I've been back and forth whether I believe in them or not, but after following you, I get a feeling that they may be very helpful in disclosing what patterns that have been learned throughout life, a mirror that doesn't reflect truth per se. Could you speak on this maybe? Yes, it's a really good question, isn't it? And I think really what this conversation allows for is a recognition that the brain, mind, body, emotional system does have its tendencies and does have the ways in which it thrives. Um, Firstly, as a human, there are conditions outside of which we do not thrive. And then as individual units, then yeah, there's just built-in tendencies, aren't there, which we could refer to as personality. And I think we can see it. And a good example, I think, is something like introversion and extroversion, which is the like two of the core personality traits. And what we can see is that, like a plant, some plants thrive more in the shade and some plants thrive more in the sunshine. It seems to be that some of us naturally get our energy more from time alone, and some of us naturally get our energy more from being in the company of others. And what can then happen, unlike with the plant, because the plant doesn't have this complication, but with the human, comes in this mind, comes in this belief structure, this identity, that this representation of self, this mental construct of self that has to be defended and secured. And so it drives behavior in trying to preserve and secure that idea of what we are. And what can happen then is that in order to protect my idea of what I am, I withdraw. I don't risk challenge to it. I don't. I don't like any sort of confrontation. I'm very sensitive and very vulnerable, and so this wall around me, in order to protect that vulnerability, sends introversion into overdrive. Or equally, um, that insecure identity that I am only feels alive, only feels validated, only feels like it exists when there's attention on it. And so um, the drive is out there to constantly be affirmed, to be recognized, to be talking, to be in a sort of in expression that um, that the identity takes as validation, takes as affirming it. It feels secure, and I think what can happen is that through this conversation, that attempt to secure an identity, either through withdrawal or being out there, becomes less and less interesting. Like, it becomes more and more obviously just a conceptual idea of what we are. And so identification falls away, and so there is no longer that driver of behavior. So there's no longer that personality, like that really sort of enhanced personality trait. It falls away. But nevertheless, there might still remain underneath it a tendency to hang out alone, or a tendency to hang out more with people. We don't know, do we? I think that's what's really interesting, is that we don't know what will change through this conversation. It's impossible to predict, really impossible. But it just doesn't matter, even slightly. So when it comes to personality tests, on the one hand, what they are measuring to a great extent is that conglomeration really of all the tendencies of that unit, that mind, body, brain, emotional system, all the tendencies, but those tendencies might change. And they might change because of the most insubstantial, unfixed element of ourselves, which is the view of self. Because as that changes, everything can change. So personality tests are valid, I would say, in the moment that they're being done, because that's what is there in that moment. And we can't forget either that they're from the perspective of the perceiver. So they're valid to the extent that the perceiver has a representation of that person according to their own beliefs, their own categorizations, really. It'd be very different cultures doing different tests. But through this conversation, I think it's impossible really to know how someone's personality could radically change. It just becomes less and less fixed and becomes more and more just interesting. Everything I think about the system that becomes more, it's so impersonal, it's completely impersonal and it's very practical as well. Just ways that it becomes obvious that the system thrives, and but equally they're not defended as me, and this is how I am. It's just in the same way that we would look after a plant. We're all house plants with imagination, pretty much. So thank you. Brilliant question. Yeah. Big love. Thanks. Bye.